The Meridian's fortune settled onto Kepler 442f, with all the grace of a falling refrigerator, which was to say it landed without exploding, and everyone involved considered that a rousing success. The colony ship had carried 127 souls across 47 light-years of empty space to a world that orbital surveys had declared highly compatible with multicultural settlement. The surveys had been correct, technically speaking. The planet possessed oxygen, water, moderate temperatures, and a thriving biosphere. What the surveys had failed to mention, because surveys are written by optimists and reviewed by people who approve funding, was that compatible is a word with considerable elasticity. Vasya Kemp stood in the provisional laboratory 3 days after landfall, staring at test results that all said the same thing in slightly different ways. She was a compact woman with hair the color of rust and the expression of someone perpetually doing math in her head. Agricultural specialist, the manifest listed her as, which was colony speak for person who keeps everyone from starving. At the moment, she was failing spectacularly at her job. Chirality inversion, she said to no one in particular. The laboratory was empty except for her and the testing equipment, which hummed with electronic indifference. Of course, why wouldn't it be chirality inversion? The planet's plant life built its amino acids backward, mirror images of what human biology required. A human could eat Kepler 442f vegetation until they burst and still starve to death, the body unable to process proteins that were chemically correct but geometrically wrong. It was the universe's way of being technically accurate while still ruining your day. Then materialized in the doorway, though materialized wasn't quite right for a being who existed partially in 3 dimensions and partially somewhere else. The Corial looked like animate crystal refracting light into uncomfortable patterns. Their species absorbed minerals directly, which made then the colony's nutritionist through a logic that made sense only in committee meetings. The results are unfavorable. Then's voice resonated from several directions simultaneously. The results are a disaster. Vasya gestured at the display. Every plant sample, same problem. We can't digest any of it. Wrong amino acids, some mildly toxic alkaloids, and a couple of compounds I can't even identify that the scanner just labels as inadvisable. The Worth report successful consumption of local vegetation. The Worth can eat anything. They're hive minds. If one of them gets poisoned, the other 1,000 compensate. Vasya pulled up another screen. The doll are filter feeding from the rivers just fine. You're absorbing local minerals without issue. It's only humans who landed on a planet that wants absolutely nothing to do with us nutritionally. Then shifted, crystal facets catching the light. The supply rations, 6 months, maybe 7 if we stretch them and enjoy being miserable. Vasya closed the displays. Resupply arrives in 18 months. So we have approximately 11 months to figure out how not to starve to death on a planet covered in food we can't eat. This is unfortunate. That's one word for it. Vasya headed for the door. I need to find Greta and Henrik. We need a plan that isn't politely starve while surrounded by abundance. She found them near the habitat modules, watching the Worth construct something elegant and incomprehensible from local materials. The Worth worked as a collective, thousands of small furry bodies moving in perfect coordination, building structures that looked like they'd grown rather than been assembled. Greta Olivaria stood with her arms crossed, her dark eyes tracking the construction with professional appreciation. She was the kind of person who thought in spreadsheets and flow charts, which made her the colony's logistics coordinator and the only reason anything got distributed to the right people at the right time. Henrik Salt sat on a storage container, methodically cleaning some piece of equipment. He was the maintenance engineer, tall and quiet, the sort of man who fixed things without drama and kept the colony's infrastructure from collapsing through sheer stubborn competence. "We have a problem," Vasya announced. "The plants are wrong," Greta said without turning around. "You knew." "I read the preliminary reports. Wrong chirality, incompatible proteins, human biology, can't process it." Greth finally looked at Vasya. "I was hoping you'd find an exception, a loophole." "No loopholes. We're biochemically incompatible with the entire local photosynthetic kingdom." Henrik looked up from his work. "So we eat animals instead." Both women stared at him. "What?" He set down the component he'd been cleaning. "Plants are wrong. Animals might be different. Different metabolic pathways, different biochemistry. Maybe we can digest them even if we can't digest what they eat." Vasya felt something shift in her head, the satisfying click of a problem rotating into a different configuration. Animals process the plants first, break them down, restructure the proteins. "Worth testing," Greth said. "Worth testing," Vasya agreed. The planet had fauna. Vasya had noted them during the landing surveys, but dismissed them as secondary concerns. Now she spent 2 days doing nothing but watching the creatures that moved through the settlement's perimeter. There were dozens of species, small skittering things, aerial creatures with too many wings, burrowing organisms that left complex tunnel networks. But one species dominated the middle ecological niche, 6-legged creatures about the size of rabbits, covered in iridescent fur that shifted colors in the sunlight. Vasya named them Skite, for no particular reason except that the sound seemed appropriate. They were everywhere, nervous and quick, feeding on the local fungi that grew in the shade of the forest edges. They had territories, predictable movement patterns, feeding times that aligned with the planet's 26-hour rotation. She spent 3 days just watching them, not capturing, not disturbing, just observing. Where they ran, where they fed, where they felt safe. The Yorth built their elegant structures. The Dol constructed aquatic pavilions in the rivers. And Vasya sat motionless near the tree line, watching small alien creatures go about their lives, while she figured out how to end some of those lives in the most efficient way possible. Henrik found her on the 4th day. "You have a plan." "Trapping." She pointed to a worn path through the underbrush. "They use the same trails, same feeding sites. They're creatures of habit. We could hunt them. We have some ammunition. Limited ammunition. Energy cells we can't spare. And hunting requires finding them every single time." Vasya stood, brushing dirt from her pants. "Traps just require understanding their behavior and letting them come to the trap. Our ancestors figured this out before they invented agriculture. I think we can manage." The first trap was humiliatingly simple. A flat stone propped up on a stick. A trigger mechanism made from salvaged wire. Bait made from the fungi the Skite preferred. Vasya set it along one of the major trails and wedged it into position. It looked primitive and crude, next to the Yorth's architectural accomplishments, like comparing a stone axe to a cathedral. Henrik studied it with professional interest. Deadfall. Classic. If it works for rocks and rabbits on Earth, it should work for rocks and alien rabbit equivalents here. And if they're edible, then we build more traps. Many more traps. The Skite died on the 4th morning, crushed cleanly under 20 kilograms of local granite. Vasya felt a small, complicated knot of satisfaction and guilt that she didn't have time to examine. She brought the carcass to the laboratory, where Grith was already waiting with the analysis equipment. The chemical breakdown took 2 hours. Vasya watched the readouts populate with the focus of someone whose life depended on the results, which was accurate. Protein content, adequate. Amino acid profile, compatible chirality, trace elements, some odd ratios but nothing immediately toxic. Fat content, surprisingly high. Digestibility, estimate, 73%, which was better than some Earth meats. It's food, Grith said quietly. Actual food. It's food, Vasya confirmed. They looked at each other across the laboratory. One skite would feed one person for perhaps a day, maybe 2, if portions were small. The colony had 37 humans. The mathematics were unforgiving and absolutely clear. We're going to need a lot of traps, Henrik said from the doorway. Grith pulled up her scheduling matrix, the digital framework she used to organize everything from shift rotations to equipment maintenance, trap construction and placement, daily checking rotation, processing and preservation. We need a system. We need to become very good at this very quickly, Vasya added. Henrik cracked his knuckles. Then let's get started. The system emerged through necessity and iteration. Vasya designed traps based on observation, box traps for the cautious species, snares positioned along flight paths where aerial creatures descended, pit traps disguised near water sources where larger animals came to drink. Henrik fabricated components from salvaged materials, bending metal and programming trigger mechanisms with the same attention he gave to life support systems. Grith built the schedule, assigning humans to trap lines in rotating shifts, tracking yields, calculating nutritional intake. Within 2 weeks they had 40 traps distributed in a 3-kilometer radius around the settlement. Each trap required checking at dawn and dusk. Each catch required processing, skinning, butchering, testing for edibility. Some species were compatible, others caused digestive distress. One caused temporary paralysis and got permanently blacklisted after Dr. Milserba spent 6 hours unable to move while still fully conscious, an experience she described as suboptimal. The smoking shed emerged from practical necessity. The colony's refrigeration went to life support and the other species' specialized needs. Humans got what was left, which was nothing. Meat spoiled in Kepler 442F's warm climate within hours. But smoke preservation was older than recorded history, and the local wood, dense, resinous and abundant, produced thick smoke when smoldered at low temperatures. Henrik constructed the shed from habitat panels and local timber, creating a structure that looked like it belonged in a historical reenactment rather than a modern colony. The wood produced acrid smoke that made everyone's eyes water and left a taste in the mouth like burning pine mixed with something unidentifiable. But the smoke drove moisture from the meat and deposited compounds that prevented bacterial growth. Smoked skite lasted weeks. Smoked prith, the oily-tasting flying creatures, lasted months. The other colonists watched this development with polite fascination, then visited the smoking shed, refracting light through the smoke in patterns that might have indicated curiosity, or might have just been how Coriel looked when confused. This preserves nutritional value. Then's voice echoed oddly in the enclosed space. Preserves the meat from rotting, Henrik explained, hanging another strip on the racks. Humans discovered this about 10,000 years ago. Still works. The Earth have offered food synthesis modifications. Perhaps human nutritional requirements could be adjusted. Can't adjust fundamental biology, Vasya said, checking the smoke temperature. We're stuck with the biochemistry we evolved, so we adapt our methods instead. Then shifted, crystal facets clicking softly. Your species is remarkably persistent. Our species is remarkably stubborn about not starving to death. Greeth corrected, making notes on her tablet. There's a difference. The trap lines became routine. Dawn checks by teams of 2, following paths that had been walked so many times they'd worn visible trails. Collect catches, reset traps, note which locations were productive and which had gone cold. Return to the settlement, process the catch, hang meat in the smoking shed. By mid-morning, the day's harvest was complete. Afternoons went to trap maintenance, scouting new locations, observing animal behavior patterns. It was unglamorous work, repetitive, the kind of labor that ground away at you through sheer accumulation rather than any single difficult moment. But it kept 37 people fed on a planet that offered them nothing they could simply pick and eat. 2 months after landfall, Vasya stood at the forest edge, watching a herd of creatures she'd named Greln. They were larger than the skite, about the size of cattle, but built lower to the ground, with 6 eyes arranged around a wedge-shaped head. They moved in groups of 20 or 30, following what appeared to be migration routes between feeding grounds. Greith joined her, tablet in hand as always. You're planning something. They're big. 1 grain probably equals 10 skite nutritionally, and they move in predictable patterns. Can we trap something that size? Not with a deadfall. Too heavy, too strong. Vasya gestured at the herd's movement. But we could guide them, channel them into a capture pen instead of killing them outright. Live capture. Greith was already calculating. Means we could breed them. Renewable food source instead of hunting wild populations to nothing. If we can figure out how to keep them alive and fed. 1 problem at a time. The funnel fence took 3 weeks to build. Henrik designed it, a structure of salvaged metal and local wood that gradually narrowed from 20 meters wide to a single capture pen. The theory was elegant. Grain, following their migration route, would enter the wide end and be guided naturally toward the pen, not realizing they were being funneled until too late. The first attempt failed completely. The grain approached the fence, stopped, and simply walked around it. Vasya watched them detour through the forest without apparent concern, navigating around the barrier like it was mildly inconvenient at worst. They don't care about visual obstacles, Henrik observed. They're not prey animals, Vasya said, thinking out loud. Nothing hunts them that they need to flee from. They just go around obstacles. She spent another week observing, this time focusing on what the grain responded to rather than what they ignored. The answer, when it came, was chemical rather than physical. The grain marked territories with dung, creating scent boundaries that other herds respected. They didn't flee from barriers. They avoided smells that indicated another herd's territory. The second funnel used scent markers, created from captured grain waste, positioned to create olfactory lanes that the herd instinctively stayed within. The grain followed their usual route, unconsciously staying between the scent boundaries, and walked directly into the pen. Henrik closed the gate. Vasya stood looking at 6 large, confused animals that represented the possibility of actual sustainability. Now we just need to keep them alive, Greith said. The holding pens grew next to the smoking shed, another structure that belonged in humanity's distant past rather than its spacefaring present. Henrik built them sturdy, using local materials reinforced with salvaged metal. The grain ate the local vegetation enthusiastically, which meant feeding them was simple. The question was whether humans could create a managed food source rather than just depleting wild populations. Dr. Mil Cesarba monitored the colonists' health with the dedication of someone who took professional failure personally. She was a short woman with grey hair and an expression of permanent skepticism, the kind of doctor who assumed you were lying about symptoms and was usually correct. "Protein intake is adequate," she reported during the weekly logistics meeting. "Fat content acceptable, but we're seeing vitamin deficiencies. B complex primarily, some D deficiency despite the sun exposure, trace mineral issues. Can we supplement from the rations?" Graith asked. "For now, but that depletes our reserves faster." Mill looked at Vasya. "Can the animal chemistry be adjusted?" Vasya had been experimenting with exactly that question. She'd been feeding captured grain different local plants, then testing whether their tissue chemistry changed. Some plants concentrated minerals in grain muscle tissue that human biology could actually absorb. Others changed the fat composition, improving the nutritional profile. "It's possible," Vasya said. "Not agriculture exactly, more like curated predation. We feed them plants that give us the nutrients we need, then we eat them." "Sounds grim when you phrase it that way," Henrik observed. "It's how all animal husbandry works. We're just being more direct about it." The Greln herd grew, 11 animals by month 4, 23 by month 10. The first birth in captivity happened on a morning when Vasya was checking the pens alone, and she watched a small, ungainly creature stagger to its feet, with the kind of wonder that comes from seeing possibility made physical. This Greln hadn't been caught. It had been born into the system humans had built, which meant the system could potentially sustain itself. She named it Resupply, as a joke that was only partly bitter. Month 14 arrived with the grinding inevitability of orbital mechanics. 4 months remained until the supply ship arrived from Earth. The human section of the colony ran on routines that would be utterly foreign to the technologically sophisticated society that had sent them, but intimately familiar to their ancestors from 10 millennia prior. Trap lines at dawn, the same paths walked in the same order by rotating teams. Vasya could walk the route without conscious thought now, her hands checking triggers and resetting mechanisms through muscle memory. The skite population had adjusted to the trapping pressure, becoming slightly more cautious, which meant adjusting trap placement and bait strategies in an ongoing evolutionary arms race. The smoking racks were never empty. Henrik had built 3 sheds now, each one producing the thick aromatic smoke that had become the colony's signature smell. The Worth section smelled of growing things and floral compounds. The dolls area carried the clean scent of running water. The human zone smelled of wood smoke and preserved meat, an odor that would have been recognizable to someone from any point in human history. Graith maintained her records with obsessive precision. Caloric intake per person, protein ratios, population estimates for wild game, breeding rates for penned animals, trap success percentages by location and species. The data painted a picture of a system that was working barely through constant attention and adjustment. Henrik performed maintenance on traps, pens and smoking equipment with the same focus he gave to the colony's vital systems. "We traveled 47 light years to become subsistence hunters," he said one morning, repairing a pen fence that a Greln had damaged. Vasya didn't laugh. She was calculating whether the Prith breeding season would overlap with Greln calving, which would mean processing capacity would be strained. "Our ancestors would understand what we're doing. That's something. Our ancestors didn't have doctorates in agricultural science. Our ancestors survived without them. We'll manage." The crisis came in month 15, not with drama but with Henrik's calm voice over the comm system. "We have a problem at Pen 3. Vasya arrived to find something large and efficient circling the Greln enclosure. It was the first significant predator she'd seen, 4 meters long, low-slung, with too many legs and a head that was mostly teeth. It hadn't attacked yet, just paced the perimeter with the patience of something that knew its prey couldn't escape. "Can we kill it?" Henrik asked. "Probably. But then we're at war with the local ecology." Vasya watched the predator move. "If we kill this one, others will come. We can't afford to fight every predator on the planet. Can't afford to lose the herd either." "No." Vasya studied the creature's behavior. It approached from the same direction each time, using the same path. Hunting at dusk when visibility was poor, following patterns just like the skite, just like the Greln. Everything on this planet was a creature of habit, which meant everything could be predicted. The solution took a week to implement, not killing the predator, but making the Greln pens unattractive compared to wild prey. Scent markers from animals the predator avoided, physical barriers positioned to block its preferred approach angle, repositioning the pens to areas with less cover for stalking, a watch rotation during the predator's hunting hours. The predator stopped coming, or rather it continued hunting but focused on easier prey. The Greln herd remained intact. Vasya added predator management to the growing list of tasks that kept humans fed. The word completed their ceremonial garden in month 16, a structure of living plants woven into patterns that shifted with the breeze. It was beautiful in a way that made Vasya feel grubby and small standing near it. Then approached her there, refracting the garden's colors through crystal facets. The human section appears, functional, then observed. It keeps us alive. That's all we need. The other species have offered assistance. Integration of human needs into colony-wide food synthesis protocols doesn't work. We tried. Our biology is too different. Vasya gestured at the smoking sheds visible in the distance. So we do what humans have always done. We figure out how to eat in a place that doesn't want to feed us. Your species is alone in this approach. Our species is alone in a lot of things. We adapt, then shifted, light bending in ways that might have been approval or might have been confusion. The persistence is notable. The persistence is survival. There's a difference. 4 months to resupply became 3, then 2. The trap lines continued. The smoking sheds ran constantly. The Greln herd stabilized at 28 individuals, a sustainable number that allowed harvesting without depleting the breeding population. Dr. Savorba reported that while human colonists were tired, they were healthy, no starvation, no nutritional collapse, no scurvy or protein deficiency. Vasya stood at dawn on day 426, checking trap line 7 with the automatic precision of long practice. The trap was empty, which happened. She reset it and moved to the next position. Behind her, smoke rose from the processing shed, where yesterday's catch was being preserved. Greta would be updating her logs, marking another day's harvest with the meticulous care that kept the system running. Henrik would be repairing something, because something always needed repair. The planet still offered humans no nutrition directly. The plants remained chemically backward, the fruits toxic, the vegetation incompatible with every aspect of human biochemistry. But humans, as they always had, found a way to take what the planet would not give. Not through conquest or force, but through observation, patience, adaptation, and the most fundamental human skill, figuring out how to eat in a place that doesn't want to feed you. The Dole built aquatic sculptures of stunning complexity. The word cultivated gardens that looked like art installations. The coral absorbed minerals and contemplated philosophical questions about the nature of sustenance. And the humans checked traps, smoked meat, managed livestock, and performed the patient, unglamorous work of refusing to starve. When the resupply ship arrived in 4 months, it would find the colony thriving. The other species would greet it from elegant structures of their own design, accomplishments that reflected their natures and capabilities. And the humans would do what they'd done for 14 months, check the traps, smoke the meat, tend the herd, and continue the ancient work of persistence. The galaxy was vast and strange, full of species with abilities humans lacked, and chemistries humans couldn't match. But humanity's oldest talents, observation, patience, stubbornness, and the bloody-minded refusal to lie down and die, those traveled well across any number of light years. The universe might not care about human survival, but humans had never particularly cared whether the universe cared. Vasya reset the last trap on line 7 and headed back toward the settlement, where smoke rose steady and familiar against Kepler 442f's alien sky. Behind her, the forest continued its indifferent existence, full of plants humans couldn't eat and animals they could. The difference between those two categories was everything. The difference was survival, and survival, as always, was enough.